Hi everyone, I'm Courtney and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a nutritionist, and one of the areas that I specialize in helping people with, both on my YouTube channel and in my private coaching, is healing overeating and healing binge eating. And so today's topic, I've been planning this video, or what may turn into a series of videos, for a while, and that is to answer a question that I get a lot, which is, what do you think of meditation as a tool for healing overeating? Do you have any experience with that? Does it work? Is it helpful? What kind should I do if I was going to do it? And these types of questions. And I've been excited in a lot of ways to make this video because I have a lot to say about it. So it's been a little bit intimidating too, because there's a lot to say. But I have personally a lot of experience in this area. And so today what I want to do is share my story, my experience with meditation, being a meditator, using it in large part, probably mainly, to help heal overeating and food addiction. And how that went for me, what I've learned from it. And then with my story, after that, I'd like to share just kind of what I've learned generally, kind of relate my story to what I think are universal principles, and kind of truths about like why people have food addictions and binge eating and stuff like that, and also how you actually heal it, what really works to heal it. I mean, this has been kind of like my life's work so far in a lot of ways to figure this stuff out. So, and I've observed a lot of people, obviously, over the years to, try meditation and see what's worked, what doesn't, why things happen the way they have. So that's the plan. So, I suppose I'll start just with like my, my meditation resume. So I started meditating mainly because I wanted something to help me heal overeating. I mean, when I started meditating, I was generally in a pretty bad place. I also had been diagnosed with depression and was just generally in a really dark spot in my life. There had been some rough things that had happened with my family, and I just generally felt in a bad way. And but also at that time I had been engaging in binge eating for a long time. I had gained a lot of weight. I'd gained about 65 pounds in about 2 years. And I, previously in my life, I'd always been kind of like, I'd always been obsessed with food. Like, I'd always been an overeater. I'd always been a junk food addict. It always had been like a fixation for me, food. And so by the time I got to this, this point that I was looking at meditation, I was really desperate because I was doing really extreme things in terms of binge eating, eating thousands of calories at once, eating other people's food, like just doing whatever I needed to do to totally stuff myself. It felt like I was trying to get drunk on food, sort of. Drinking scared me, so that wasn't really my particular draw. But food, I was, I was numbing out a lot, and it was very severe. And it became like my main focus was like, how do I lose this weight? Why is this happening? How do I stop this? Because it's spiraling out of control. Like, I've gained 65 pounds in 2 years and I feel bad. I feel tired all the time. I had acne. Like, the food was just causing, what I was doing with food was just causing so many problems. And I couldn't really even think about much else, in my life other than that. So anyway, and then on top of, like I said, the kind of emotional issues that I had otherwise and the challenging place that I was in generally. So at that time, I started really looking at anything that I thought could help me, heal what I was doing with food and just like be happier and just like get myself together because everything was falling apart. And I was pretty open to anything. So any strategy, any tool, any practice, like I was willing to do it, try it, give it a fair shot because I was very desperate. And so I first learned TM, or what's called Transcendental Meditation. I paid the course to learn that meditation officially. And that, for people who don't know, is mainly like a mantra-based meditation. And I did that for a while. And then after that, I moved on, and I actually lived at a retreat center. Well, I worked there. I didn't actually live on the property, but I moved to a retreat center to work there. And they were very focused on meditation as well. And so they had meditations every night, pretty much, I think, yeah, every night. And I would attend those. And then I was at that retreat center for 5 years. And then I had the previous period of time meditating before that and some after. So I'd say it's fair to say that I meditated for about 6 years, pretty regularly. And when I say regularly, probably, 3 to 5 hours a week. Some weeks were probably less. There were some times, I'd go on vacation, obviously, and might not meditate as much. And then there were times where it was more, because I often did meditation retreats or yoga retreats, that included a lot of meditation. And so sometimes, there were retreats I went on where I would be meditating a number of hours every day. So then after the TM, I learned a form of meditation that we did at the center, which was kind of a breath and mantra meditation combined. And that was the one that I did for most of the time. So that was kind of the main type of meditation. But I did try tons of meditations, because like I said, I was like game for anything, up for anything that would help me or could help me. And so I've tried, lots of mantra meditations, different kinds of breath meditations, Kundalini meditations, meditations with essential oils, visualization meditations, long meditations, short meditations. There's been a lot of versions that I've tried. And so anyway, I started doing that. And my first experience with it was that I really didn't like sitting still, and I really didn't like being with myself. And so, as you can probably imagine, when you're in a frenzy with food, which looking back, like I was in a frenzy with food, but I was also just in a frenzy all the time. Like I didn't feel my emotions. I didn't stop. I couldn't sit down. I was just, there was, anxiety all the time. So meditation was really challenging for me because it forced me to stop and to breathe and to not have any distractions. Not even visual distractions, right? I didn't even have the visual distractions of taking a walk in the woods, which I also find pretty meditative, or, it was just me being with myself. And, without getting into too much of a discussion about the whole philosophies around meditation and kind of almost like the spiritual principles that direct a lot of that, maybe that'll be another video. But what I wanted to say about that is, the way I was taught meditation was a lot about, and I think this is common for a lot of people, there was a lot of teachings around, you watch your thoughts, you observe them, you watch your feelings, you observe them, you disconnect from them, or you kind of stay, they didn't always use the word disconnect, but you stay kind of like an observer. You transcend your ego, you do all these things, right? Point being, there was this feeling that what you were supposed to do was just, be kind of separate from those things, watch them, observe them, find, and I'm using all the language, right, of all the stuff that I was taught for years, to just observe what's happening and find the, you that's the higher self. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of things about sort of spirituality and how the soul works that I've learned now are true that are different from what I learned before, that a lot of these premises are based on. So I will talk a bit more about that later. But, I was going into these meditations feeling like, okay, what I'm supposed to do is, observe these feelings and these thoughts and, rise above them and just find that still place. And for me, that was challenging because what I found was that the first thing that happened was I went into a panic. It was like I couldn't stand still. It was so hard for me to sit still. But what was good about that was that because it did force me to be with myself and to sit still without any distractions, which is something I'd never done in my whole life, it forced me to become aware of different feelings that I had. But the interesting thing about this is this happened, but it wasn't really the meditations that I learned and the people who were teaching it. That wasn't why they said to do the meditation. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like what I'm trying to illustrate here is there was a benefit that started happening, but it was almost like accidental. It wasn't the point of the meditations that I was taught. But what I would find is that sometimes, because I was forced to sit and stop the frenzy and the panic emotionally and like just breathe. Also the fact that particularly the breathing meditations forced me to kind of like be in my body. Whereas I was always one of those people who was out of body all the time. So I often had these times where I became aware of like what I was feeling, oh, I'm feeling this about my day today, or I'm feeling this about my life, or wow, I noticed that whenever I actually just stop and observe, I'm always going back to this topic that's constantly bothering me. I became more aware of times when I was angry. I became more aware of when I felt sad. All these things that for me at the time, that was really revolutionary because I never checked in with myself emotionally. I was never in my body. I was in a constant frenzy of eat, be on the internet, be on social media, entertain, have other people to talk to, And so I started noticing some benefit because of that, because I was becoming more connected to myself sometimes. But what I also want to say here is that there was a lot of times where, I did what I was supposed to do with this meditation, right? And I stepped back from my feelings and my thoughts, and I did the whole observer thing and all that. And, what I would find when I was successful at that is, yes, after I had the feeling that a lot of people who meditate describe, so I was like, oh, I feel so zen. I feel calmed down now, and all of that. But what I also would notice is that I was doing all this diligent meditation, and a lot of times I was, doing it the way I was supposed to. But if I observed my patterns with my eating, if I use the measurement, which is what I recommend to everyone, the measurement is going to be what you do with food and also what you want to do with food, right? What you're still inclined to do with food. And I would find that food wasn't really changing. And I would sometimes even find, I'd have this great meditation, great by meditation standards. I'd feel zen and calmed down after. But then, 10 minutes later, something could trigger me, right? Like, boyfriend did something or family did something or something went wrong, whatever. Something could trigger me and I was right back into that food. Like, as if the meditation didn't happen, right? It didn't have really lasting effects. It would last a few hours, maybe a day, whatever. But I always would fall back into the same patterns. But I wasn't, but the other thing is, and this is what I wanted to say, because I find this is what other people have told me with meditation, is I thought all the time with meditation, like all the years that I did it, I had this feeling like I just must be a bad meditator. Like I felt bad about myself, kind of like, because other people would describe sometimes all these like, I don't know, life-changing things that would happen with meditation. And I was like, well, it's nice. And obviously I liked, I was drawn to it, I guess, enough to do it for 6 years. But I just constantly had this feeling like I'm doing something wrong. Like this should be healing my binge eating. This should be solving all my issues. This should, like, it must be me. I must be not a good meditator. I'm not doing it long enough or right enough or whatever. And so, I had that happen. And a few times I did have, some growth emotionally, but I feel, like I said before, like it was more like an accident of the meditation. It was like a unintended benefit that not only wasn't really what I was taught the meditation, like how I should do the meditation, but it also was sometimes almost the opposite of what the meditation was supposed to do. In the sense that sometimes I had experiences where, I'd realize that, oh, I feel this way, I feel that, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel anxious, I feel upset at such and such person. And then because I had to be in my body and I had to be still and I had to have no distractions, I would end up having a cry. Or if I was in a position, sometimes I would get up from the meditation after realizing in the meditation how angry I was, and I'd go and like have a rage, and I'd throw some shoes and scream and and that was when I started noticing some differences, is when I did that type of thing. Now, simultaneously, or kind of maybe a little later, I, started learning from some books that I read about the topic of healing food addictions, about, basically the approach of you need to feel your feelings. These food addictions are there to help you avoid truths and to help you be distracted and to help you suppress, deny, emotions. And so, long story short, the way to heal it is to feel those emotions and to figure out why you've got blocks to feeling them, and all of that. And, again, I was so desperate to heal what I was doing with food and lose the weight that, like, I was like, fine. If I need to, to do that, then I'm going to do it. And so what I started doing, was really looking at what my attitudes about emotions were. I had never, and the weird thing about this was, it felt like the opposite strategy of what I was kind of being taught in this sort of new age spiritual circles that I was in and the meditation circles, in the sense that I was starting to look at how can I allow myself to get messier emotionally, right? How can I allow myself to feel rage, to express rage, to cry a lot, and there was some preliminary work there in realizing that I had a lot of judgments about those emotions and a lot of fears about those emotions. So then I started working on trying to feel those emotions. And when I say feel those emotions, as I've talked about in some other videos too, I define that as like being with it, not distracting while you're feeling it, letting that emotion exist in your body, feeling where, sort of like where the emotion feels in your body. And then ultimately to actually, I believe to actually feel the emotion properly, the way that it looks is the same as a little kid who's feeling emotions. So if you're angry, you're going to be overt, you're going to have a cathartic expression of it. If you are sad, you're going to cry, and this and that, right? So I started examining that, that strategy, and that was interesting because, like I said, it was like kind of the opposite. My sort of spiritual teachings at the time were trying to lean me towards being this like Zen master who transcends it all, and is sort of chill all the time. And then I was reading these other books that were saying like, the authors were talking about, destroying their scales and their anger, and like, they were talking about just these different like emotional releases that they had that were just the opposite of what I was doing. And what I started observing was like when I really sincerely got into a painful emotion and felt that properly and, gave it a really good cathartic outlet, I would find that I started feeling better after that. And it was a kind of relief that felt very different than after I meditated. After I had these emotional releases, it felt more like a release. Like I'd actually let go of something and I've actually like taken, if I had a backpack of rocks, I've taken out some rocks. Whereas after meditation, I felt like more, like I felt better, but it just wasn't the same sense of like I've let go of something and I feel this like burden released. It's hard to describe, but it was just a different sensation. And what I would find too after the emotional releases that I didn't find with the meditation, I'd find that after I had an emotional release, I would notice that my draw to food was less. So sometimes what would happen is I'd realize, I really just want to go home and binge on ice cream tonight. And then I'd think to myself, well, like, I'm trying to heal this. This is about some kind of suppressed emotion. What are you really feeling here? Let's go into it that way. So then I would do that. And a lot of times that would be anger, rage, sometimes anxiety. I'd cry sometimes about what I discovered and all that. And after that, I would find like, oh, I'm okay not having an ice cream binge tonight, actually. But it was a genuine thing. It wasn't me trying to not have an ice cream binge. It was like, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay. And so I started observing that, and that was really interesting. And what I also noticed was that simultaneous with the, just the feeling of emotions, this other process that started revealing itself to me as a process that was making some difference was really looking at coming to terms with my childhood, my relationship with my family, and things that had happened there. Because for me, a lot of the emotion was locked up. Like, it was like I had all these addictions with food, but a lot of the emotions that I needed to feel to heal those addictions with food were locked up because I was in such a denial about what really happened in my life and in my childhood. And yeah. And so a lot of it was really also, reading books about family relationships and kind of like learning and being more open to like what really happened to me. And some of you might be able to relate to this. I was a person who, and I'll go into detail, I'm sure, on all this in future videos, but I was a person who really thought like I had a good childhood, like things weren't too bad. Some things at this point that I'm describing, and there have been some recent things with family, but I really was like, looking back, I was in I was in so much denial about what really happened because there wasn't like really overt, awful, at the time, what I considered really overt, awful, dramatic things that had happened. So the point I'm getting to is that, I started finding that this process of being more honest with myself about my family and looking at the fact that maybe I had these food addictions and this depression for a reason that had to do with how I was treated and what I was suppressing about unloving things in my family. And then subsequently, coming to realize some of those things which brought up feelings that then I felt. So anyway, then I went on for probably a couple of years more where I was essentially doing both approaches. Like I said, I was in a bit of a battle with myself because, I was hanging out with all these meditators who are always, send out and it's all good and, like whatever. And I tried to be that way. And then in private, I was like a crazy person, or I thought that's how I felt, And then, and I kept meditating, I wasn't like convinced that meditation, well, like looking back, I can see that if I kind of really sat down with myself, I could probably say, you know what, I don't feel like the meditation is really doing much for me. But I was so in that world where everyone was just like, no, this is it. Like, this is how you practice spirituality. Like, this is the way this is life. Like, I just wasn't ready to question those like bigger picture things yet either. And so I just kept doing it. And there was a community around it, and I don't know, I was just still in all that. But what I noticed, was that I felt like I was having way more progress with this topic or with this approach of discovering truth and feeling emotions than I was with meditation's approach. So then, probably fast forward about, I don't know, 5.5 years-ish into kind of my regular meditation journey experience, I discovered the Divine Truth teachings, which I have talked about on this channel, and like, where do I even start with them? They have changed my life, and they've been the number one thing by far that has helped me to continue to heal food addictions and depression and lots of other things. So I discovered them, and that was really interesting because those teachings, they helped me really understand what had been happening to me in the last years where I was trying these approaches with healing food addiction and with meditation, and also just helped me generally in understanding like my whole life why I had these issues with food. And so, Jesus and Mary, who teach the Divine Truth teachings, would talk about things like that, all addictions, including food addictions, are there to help us suppress emotions, be in denial of emotions, and, be in denial of truths, help us avoid dealing with truths about our childhood and stuff. So kind of similar to what I had been learning from some of these books about healing overeating, except the Divine Truth teachings go like way more in depth when it comes to understanding really like how the human soul works and why emotions are just so key. So, and a lot of the ways that I've been describing my journey in retrospect, a lot of the terms I've been using in the framework I've been using actually has been because I found the Divine Truth teachings. Like if you were to get me to talk about my experiences before I found those, I would have used different words and different terminology, but finding Divine Truth really helped me like understand. And basically what they helped me understand was that what I had been doing with trying to discover truth about my childhood and my family and the real why I had this food addiction. It wasn't just because I was crazy or lacked willpower or it was genetic or hormonal, like it was emotional and there was a reason for it. It helped me understand that approach and the approach of feeling emotions and the approach of cathartically releasing those emotions, like physically when you're angry, bashing something, and when you're sad, you're crying. And like, it helped me understand that like that was the way to heal. That's the way to heal the emotional injuries in the soul. That is the way to release painful or negative emotions. And that there is no other way other than that, because that is how the human soul works. And so that helped me look at, back in retrospect, and helped a lot in the sense of being like, okay, I can see that really, and this is a whole other thing I want to kind of talk about next, what I was being encouraged to do with the meditations that I learned was actually to suppress emotion. And for a long time when I was doing the rehearsals of this video, I was like, I gotta say what I really think about it. And, what I have observed is that most meditations, while they would not use that terminology, right, because it's based on a whole premise of spirituality, they use terms more about transcending or rising above or whatever. But now I look back and I feel like, no, what they really were encouraging me to do was to suppress how I felt. And that is why sometimes after meditation, I did have that like zenned out feeling. It wasn't really because the meditation was doing something positive for me. It was actually because it had just helped me disconnect from the feeling. So like I might have gone into the meditation feeling sad or angry or scared, come out of the meditation not feeling that way, which a lot of people would say, well, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm doing meditation for. Like, that's what I want. But when you learn really how the soul works and how bad for us it is to suppress emotions, like that is the worst thing that we could do, really. And so, I can look back and see that there were other times where I actually feel that doing meditation slowed my progress. It hindered my progress and was a detriment to my progress with emotionally healing and with healing my relationship to food and stopping the binge eating and losing weight. It was a detriment. And that was because it was helping me get out of my emotions and disconnect from painful emotions when what I really needed to be doing was feeling them. And and there was no, like, yeah, there's so much I could say. It's like feeling really emotional and having a lot of those strong emotions when I was in the meditation world made me feel like I was doing spirituality wrong, you know? And then I discovered, no, actually, I need to feel the emotions. That's the way to heal this stuff. And so yeah. And so then I actually still, even after finding divine truth, I was still like, no, surely this meditation stuff is right. So I kept doing it for a while. Again, meanwhile, also exploring these other approaches. But eventually, I just was like, I don't feel like doing this meditation is really making that big of a difference. And these other processes are working way better. And meditation takes time, and it just doesn't feel like a good use of time anymore. And so I stopped. And now I haven't meditated, by those kinds of definitions for probably, gosh, I don't know. Yeah, 7 years at the time of the recording of this video, something like that. And so now, and by the way, I've told my story, but I've worked with a lot of people who've had, kind of some similar experiences where they've been trying to meditate. They feel like it's got mixed results a lot of the time, and if they step back and look at their relationship to food over a period of time, a lot of them would confess that it hasn't really changed that much. And they feel like maybe it's because they're doing it wrong, or they're not a good meditator, or they're not doing enough of it, or they're doing the wrong type of meditation or something. And, I feel like that's a bummer, because I feel like that's not necessarily why people aren't seeing a difference with it. Now, I do want to clarify here that, the word meditation these days is like, it can mean a lot of different things. And I have, on rare occasions, heard of kind of like approaches or practices that are often called meditations. But when I've heard about what they're designed for, what the intention is, and how they're done, I've gone like, oh, actually, that's interesting. This is being called a meditation, but it's actually like encouraging people to get into emotions, or to connect with themselves. And so I did want to say that, I do think that it's going to depend on like what the meditation is. And with so many things, what I'm realizing is like, it depends on what the intention is. You could meditate with the underlying intention to get away from your painful emotions or the truth about something. And then that's going to be a hindrance to you. Or you could meditate and use some kind of technique that's out there that is designed to help be a vehicle to get you into your painful emotions. And it seems to me that that would be really helpful. You could go on a walk outside with the intention of getting away from your painful emotions. Not going to be very helpful. But if you go for that walk, I want to get into my stuff and feel how I feel, that could be very good. And so, yeah. So, it's like, I just think it depends on why you're doing it. But what I've observed for the kinds of meditations that I was taught, and the vast majority of kinds of meditations and intents of meditations that I have seen, most of them really in the end are encouraging people to get away from their feelings and get away from truths. or at least they're not actively encouraging you to get into emotions, you know? And so that is, I guess, what I would say in terms of criteria, you know, what I'd recommend in terms of criteria on whether you want to try any particular meditation approach or even other things. Like, you could probably apply this to yoga and like all kinds of things. It's just like, what is the intention? What are we going for here? Is this helping me open up emotionally, connect to my deeper feelings, or is it helping me get away from them? And I think that that is going to be, you know, the biggest thing to look at. Because what I have found in retrospect of, you know, the last, like I said, at the time of the recording of this video, I've been consciously working on my relationship to food for probably 14, 15 years. And what I have found in retrospect is that it has not been being a zened out meditation master. Like, that's not been what has healed it. It has been being messy, you know, feeling the intense emotions responsibly, of course, but like, it has been basically the opposite of being zen. Of course, ironically, after I feel the intense emotions, the more I do that, I tend to feel, you know, more peaceful. After I do that, as kind of like a normal knock-on effect, I think, but it's like, it's the feeling of those emotions and going through the messy, painful process of extracting them. That has been the biggest thing that has helped me. And like I said, also doing this whole thing of exploring the truth about our upbringing, about our families, about our formative years, because I do believe that food addictions are a result of suppressing emotions, that a lot of those emotions are related to, you know, what happened, that we are often in denial of. And, you know, as far as I know, there's not a lot of meditations that are designed for the purpose of saying, hey, what am I in denial of from my childhood, and how can I discover that truth, even if it's really hard, and connect with it emotionally, and, you know. And another point I wanted to make about it too is, like, you know, sometimes I've talked with people who say like that when they meditate regularly and they're like quite disciplined about it, their eating gets much better. But then if they don't do it regularly, then they kind of fall off the wagon, they get busy or whatever, and they don't do it as much, that their relationship to food then suffers and they fall back into old patterns of eating. And to me, that tells me that the meditation isn't actually healing the food stuff at the root cause issue. It's just temporarily helping the person not engage that behavior. And to me, real freedom with food, or real healing of our relationship to food, is getting to the point where you don't have to be strapped to a particular practice or meditation or ritual or anything. You don't have to be strapped to that in order to not behave against your own best interest with food. To me, really healing our relationship to food is getting to the point where we've healed the root causes of why we want to do it, and what emotions we're suppressing and what's really going on there. And then you get to the point where life can throw whatever curveballs. You can not meditate. You can, you know, you don't have to be strapped to anything to kind of like almost control yourself. And so that's what I want for all my clients and everybody, you know, because I really believe that's possible to actually, get to a point where you've healed the root causes so that you don't need any practice or ritual to be loving to yourself with food, you know, because if the better behavior with food is only temporary and contingent on your like discipline with a practice or ritual, to me that says that the underlying issues are not healed yet, which isn't a judgment, it's just an observation. And so what I find is that when you heal some of the root causes and you're willing to feel emotions more, you just act in your own best interests and you don't compulsively eat as much, but it's not even hard. Like, you're not even trying to not. You just feel differently about it. So So that's what I hope for everyone. And again, I highly recommend going over and listening to Jesus and Mary's teachings with the Divine Truth material, because it will explain more not only about meditation and emotions, but more about like how you actually feel those emotions. What does this process actually look like? And just like the scientific understanding of how the human soul works, which is super fascinating. So I'll leave that info below. And if anybody has any more questions or thoughts or things, that they're wondering about this topic, like I said, there's a lot to be said, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a bit more that we could talk about in future videos. So feel free to email me at my website or on some of my social media platforms that I have, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.